This is a mind-bogglingly busy afternoon now, isn't it? Let's just clear up the stuff that we know so far about the possibility of an election being called, because we are piecing this all together. It's I don't know what it is. Is it a chess picture at the moment, a mahjong board? What is it that we're seeing happen in front of us? It's all to do with what people are wearing and where Grant Shapps is.
Well, yeah, and David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, has been called back from abroad to attend a cabinet meeting. That really set some hairs running, I think. Jeremy Hunt, as we know, has now pulled out of a TV appearance on Peston later on. Everything seems to be indicating that he is going to call an election. I think if he wasn't to call it now, after all the speculation throughout the day and having had an opportunity to kill off the speculation, he would look like he'd bottled it. So I think it's inevitable now that we're heading for an election in July, either the 4th or July the 11th, I think.
Do you think it would be a good call?
Well, if you look at it objectively, you think, well, they're still miles behind Labour in the polls. I mean, 20 points on average, and those polls have been rock solid for months now, pretty much since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. So, on the one hand, that does look like mad to go to the country in that set of circumstances. However, the economic indicators are better. We only got this morning that inflation is now down to 2.3%. It's quite interesting that Rishi Sunak said he described that as being back to normal. So I think, that gives him a platform to go out and say, stick with the plan, as he's been saying. It's working. We've turned a corner. Don't take a risk with Labour. But Labour will turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, you've had 14 years, it's time for a change.
What about the Rwanda flights? Because when we've talked about when an election might be before, there has been this idea that to see a plane take off would be a good optic ahead of an election. And if it were to be on either July the 4th or the 11th, could the government be certain that that flight would have gone? Have you ever thought that that would be a good optic?
Well, obviously the promise was to stop the boats. This promise that Rishi Sunak made when he became Prime Minister was never to get a flight off to Rwanda. So it's a pretty low bar that he's looking to clear. But given the agonies that they've gone through to try and get this far, I suppose he could point to it as signs of progress. But we're in the middle of a year now where record numbers are still coming over in small boats. So again, I think that's quite an easy target for the opposition to say, well, he's failed. But the optics of it, I guess he could say, well, look, we're making progress. Again, stick with the plan. Things are heading in the right direction. Don't take a risk with Labour, is what he will look to say. But then again, it's not guaranteed that the flights will take off before it. If we get to an election day and not a single flight has taken off for whatever reason, then I think he's just going to he'll live to regret it.
We've also speculated that it might not be a good optic if it's a very big plane with only a couple of people on it. If there are 5 guards to every one person, it's a bit of an own goal for the opposition to take it apart. And as you say, drawing that line between flights taking off and the numbers of people coming on boats, it would seem to point to the fact that the criminal gangs are not saying, don't go over there because you'll end up in Rwanda.
Yeah, well, the whole point of it's meant to be a deterrent, isn't it? And thus far, it hasn't proved to be a deterrent. Far from it. As we say, the numbers have actually gone up this year. And I think if it were to be the case that it be a small number on the planes, which is absolutely possible, then Labour could turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, this is costing a fortune. They would quickly do the sums and work out, well, it's cost $500,000 or whatever to send one person over to Rwanda. Is that good value for money? That's just another sign of a government in chaos, which has been the Labour line for quite some time.
Just one more political question and then we will return to the Post Office inquiry. The idea that Jeremy Hunt might be departing from his post as Chancellor, would that be enough to bring very senior figures in the government around a cabinet table this afternoon?
I wouldn't have thought so, no. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be enough to get David Cameron. I think if David Cameron had to jump on a plane early to say, what, you mean to say I've come back for this? So no, I don't think so. Although, interestingly, after Prime Minister's questions today, there's usually a little huddle, as we call it, with the Prime Minister's spokesman to ask questions. And she would not reaffirm that Jeremy Hunt will be the Chancellor come the general election. So read into that what you will.
Lots more speculation. I've just heard that Jeremy Hunt has apparently pulled out of doing Robert Peston's show tonight, Kevin. I don't know what my voice has gone really high.
Well, Robert Peston did tweet earlier that he believed he was going to call an election, but he couldn't say why. But I guess that must be it. He must have known that Jeremy Hunt had pulled out. Now that indicates to me that it's definitely happening.
Oh my goodness.
I think.
Fee
And why else
Garvey
would
is
he-
with us now.
Have you
Fee
just
Glover.
you've portmanteaued me
I've
into my
portmanteaued you.
colleague?
I'm so sorry
We
about
are
that.
separate people.
It's because Oliver Shat and I became Shazarika. We've just become like a single entity now. So I'm doing that with
Oh,
everybody.
that's absolutely fine. One of our bosses at the BBC once invited one of us to to the BBC box for last night of the proms and spent the whole evening talking to one of us, assuming that it was the other one of us.
You're a bit like you're
until
like
Jane had to say, "I'm Jane Garvey." Did you mean to invite the other one? At which point she said yes.
because you're such legends. You have reached Ant and Dec status
It's like Jedward.
when nobody can tell. Nobody knows.
I'm going to go with her. I'm not going with you.
I don't blame you.
Now, okay, we're going to go to the horizon in a minute, but what do you think about all this fevered speculation about a general election?
Well, I mean, it's just the atmosphere is so close, isn't it? Everybody is walking at that very, very different speed around the building at the moment, looking at their phone all of the time, checking it every 3 seconds.
Power walking.
There's power walking. There's people who've got contacts, people who've got better contacts. Who knows this? Who knows that? And I mean, we are just going to know, aren't we, by 5 o'clock this afternoon, whether or not obviously whether or not it's going to be called. Are you busy on July the 4th?
Not doing very much.
We'll get the lectern as the giveaway, isn't it?
Also,
the lectern will appear
yes.
before he makes the announcement, and then we'll know for sure.
July the 4th, obviously it was Independence Day. It was also the day when after COVID, when they opened up all the restaurants. That was on July the 4th because
Was it?
yeah, so it's
Okay.
quite
Because he made it because of Independence.
Independence
that was
Day.
Boris,
Yes,
that's what he did,
yes.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting gap in the Euros as well. So if England were to make it to a quarter
Or
final,
Scotland.
yes, I'm so sorry.
I mean, come
I'm
on.
joking, obviously.
So I just apologise for what I'm going to say here. Then it would be the next day. So so there could be quite a lot of people who are out of the country or preparing to do something else.
Well,
look, it's everything to play for. So obviously, the more detail that we get, the more gossip that we get. We're just happy to pass it on to you this afternoon. Good point to join John Pienaar with news of what's going to be in his programme. You might be on the edge of your seat, John.
Yeah, and I don't have any news. I've just got an awful lot of feverish speculation. I mean, what do we know so far? Well, the Cabinet is going to be meeting in about half an hour, 45 minutes time. And when you have the news that, we understand, don't we, that David Cameron has been pulled back from a foreign trip to Albania and Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, being held back from a NATO meeting, that tells you, doesn't it, that something big is coming. Something big is coming. Now, as to what that is, that's when we get into sort of, towel on head, ice packs and wild guesswork, which is more or less and largely less informed. And it ranges from the Prime Minister coming out into Downing Street at about, 5 o'clock, classic sort of time, and telling us there's going to be a snap election in summer at some point. Who knows, maybe the 4th of July or some point, similar to that. Or there's going to be a reshuffle in the Cabinet, getting the campaign team, the top team in place, with some say, I'm going to just stop all this chatter and say we're going to have an autumn election. I can tell you that now. Those are kind of the options which are bouncing around, and I don't know which of those it may or may not be, but I do know that at 5 o'clock we're going to be on air and looking hard at Downing Street. Kay McCann is going to be, I think, down there for us, and we'll bring it to you live and kicking, and we'll be talking about it with all the experts you could ever want. Ian Martin, I think, is going to be with me high up in the programme. I've got Tim Montgomery, who's like a walking, talking firework at the best of times. And we'll see what Tim makes of all of this. So it's going to be whatever else it's going to be. It's going to be a good
It's going to be
listen.
an exciting afternoon, isn't it?